Have you ever looked at someone and thought, how do they understand things instantly? What if I told you that intelligence like that isn't just luck or genetics? What if you can actually train your brain to think this way? I know it works because I've tested it on myself. I'm Salim, I've completed 3 university degrees, work full-time as a doctor, run this YouTube channel, coach students and professionals, and still have time for a life outside of work. And in this video, I'll show you 3 methods that can rewire the way you process information, strategies used by the smartest thinkers every day. By the end, you'll be able to learn deeper, solve problems faster, and think more flexibly. And stick around for a simple trick at the end that ties all 3 methods together so your brain starts connecting ideas naturally without extra effort. So first, most people think being smart is about collecting information. They memorize facts, fill notebooks, and assume that knowing more automatically makes them smarter. But the smartest people don't work this way. Instead of just memorizing facts, they build mental networks. But what does that actually mean? It's about linking ideas together, spotting patterns, and understanding relationships that most people completely miss. Think of your brain like a city. Facts are the dots or buildings on a map, and connections are the roads between them. Without the roads, all the dots are useless. You might know a fact here or another there, but you can't navigate the city or solve new problems efficiently. Add the roads though, and suddenly you can explore the whole city. You see shortcuts, understand traffic flow, and can get anywhere fast. Most people study in isolation. Notes sit in a folder, flashcards in a box, highlights in a textbook. This keeps knowledge disconnected. High-level thinkers do something different. While learning, they naturally ask, how does this relate to what I already know? What category does it belong to? What principle explains it? These questions sound simple, but they change everything because they turn memorization into real understanding. And here's a practical method you can use. After learning anything, force yourself to connect it to 3 ideas you already know. Ask yourself, what is this similar to? What is this the opposite of? And how does this fit into a bigger picture? As an example, I was studying pharmacology in med school, and instead of memorizing every drug and side effect, I asked, how is this drug like others in its class? How does it affect the body differently? And what problem does it solve that others don't? Suddenly, drugs weren't isolated facts. They became a network I could navigate. I could predict effects of drugs I hadn't even learnt yet. And for another example, in everyday life, where you learn a new productivity method, don't just copy it. Ask, how is this similar to something I already do? What is the principle behind it? And how could I apply it to somewhere else? Over time, this builds what's called deep processing, where your brain starts to organize information in a way that makes retrieval and problem solving faster rather than just storing it away. The more connections you make, the more your brain starts thinking like a high-level thinker automatically, making learning feel fluid instead of forced. One way to take this even further is to explain the connection out loud or write it down. Hearing or seeing your own explanation strengthens that mental network. This method helps you understand systems and spot patterns across all kinds of learning, whether in work, school, or personal projects. And here's why this matters for the next method. Once you can think in connections, you're ready to handle the cognitive strain that's essential for genius-level insight. And before the next point, I'm working on building an AI coaching app to give you a genuinely personalized productivity system, one that knows your goals, tracks where your time actually goes, and gives you specific, direct, and honest feedback on what's working and what isn't. All designed as though it's a digital version of me personally coaching you. If this sounds useful, join my newsletter in the description box below to hear first when it's out. And as a thank you, subscribers will get an exclusive discount when it launches. There's also a quick survey in the description so I can make the app as useful as possible for you. Thank you, and now back to the video. The next method will show you how to get comfortable with confusion. Now that you've learned to think in connections, the next step is handling the discomfort that comes with real learning. This is about increasing your cognitive strain tolerance, which is basically training your brain to embrace mental effort without giving up. Because most people quit when thinking gets hard. Geniuses, on the other hand, stay longer because real insight happens at the edge of confusion. Think of it like lifting weights. Easy effort builds nothing. Cognitive strain is your brain's workout, and discomfort is a signal that growth is happening. A common mistake is rushing to simplify things or check answers immediately. It feels comfortable, but it keeps your brain weak. So there are 4 steps to help you build this mental toughness. Step 1 is to delay note-taking. Sit with the problem and wrestle with it in your mind first. Writing notes too early often offloads thinking instead of building real understanding. Step 2 involves attempting first and checking later. Try to solve a problem or answer a question on your own before looking for solutions. Struggling first forces your brain to work harder and form stronger connections. Step 3 is to read challenging material without simplifying. Hard books or dense articles aren't obstacles. They're exercises that push your brain to deeper understanding. And step 4 is to gradually increase task complexity. Once easier problems feel manageable, tackle slightly harder ones. This pushes your limits without overwhelming you, like progressive overload at the gym. For example, when I coach students, I encourage them to wrestle with tough questions without seeking instant answers. Early frustration is normal, but the improvement in understanding understanding is dramatic. The principle is simple. Discomfort signals growth. Avoid it and your thinking stagnates. Lean into it and your brain rewires itself to handle complexity naturally. Combine this with the first method, thinking and connections, and cognitive strain becomes more manageable because the connections give your brain frameworks to process tough problems. Over time, your tolerance reshapes your mind and solutions start emerging that others completely miss. And as an extra tip, when something feels confusing, go back to the first method and ask, what is this similar to and what principle is at work here? This integrates connection building into the mental strain itself. It also helps to teach or explain confusing material because articulating difficult concepts strengthens your networks and your ability to handle mental strain. I've used this method for everything from studying, coaching clients and making YouTube videos to practicing piano, and this sets you up perfectly for the final method, feedback loops, which take all your effort and turn it into lasting intelligence while correcting errors you might never notice otherwise. Because now you've trained your brain to think in connections and handle cognitive strain, the final method is about turning all that effort into real, lasting intelligence. This is where feedback loops come in, the process of testing, connecting and refining your thinking. Most people practice privately, assume they understand, and never realize the gaps in their knowledge. But high-level thinkers constantly test their understanding, they validate and refine what they know. Without feedback, errors get reinforced. You might think you understand something perfectly, but in reality, you're building shaky foundations. It's like building the wrong muscle memory by repeating mistakes. It makes errors harder to fix later on. So feedback loops are there to act as mirrors for your brain. They show you what's strong and what needs fixing. And again, there are 4 practical steps to implement them. Step 1, teach out loud. Explain a concept to yourself or someone else. If you struggle to explain it clearly, that's exactly where your brain needs more work. You could also use an AI or voice recorder as a sounding board to get feedback. Step 2, get your thinking graded by reality. Apply the idea in a real situation and see what happens. If you're studying, do exam style questions. If you're learning business, sell or ship something. If you're learning a skill, perform under mild pressure. Reality gives feedback far more honestly than your notes ever will. Step 3, test recall without prompts. Close the book or turn off your notes and try to reconstruct the idea from memory. This exposes gaps and reinforces real mastery. And step 4, surround yourself with people slightly ahead of you, not people miles ahead, just one level up. Ask them to challenge your reasoning, let them question your assumptions. That small gap is where the fastest growth happens. For example, when I coach students or other professionals, I often have them asking me questions that I hadn't anticipated. They highlight blind spots in my own thinking and push me to improve. And for another example, when I'm working on a personal project like building a system for time management or studying a new skill, I explain my approach aloud to someone else who might be more knowledgeable. Their questions reveal weaknesses I wouldn't notice on my own and help me work on those gaps. This can feel uncomfortable, but it's about accelerated growth. Every question, correction, and revision sharpens your thinking. Feedback loops also make learning faster. Instead of spending hours reviewing what you already know, you focus on exactly what needs improvement. And this ties perfectly with the first 2 methods. When you hit a confusing area under cognitive strain, explain it aloud or write it down. Then review your output critically. This creates a self-reinforcing loop that rewires your brain. Over time, this approach transforms passive learning into active mastery. Your brain starts catching errors automatically and improves itself without constant external input. The end result is not just knowledge, but a thinking system, one that can solve new problems, make connections, and self-correct continuously. By mastering how to think in connections, tolerate cognitive strain, and apply feedback loops, you'll train your brain to operate like a high-level thinker every single day. But here's something most people don't realize. Learning how to think like a genius doesn't automatically fix your life. Because if your time is chaotic, your intelligence never gets used properly. I know this because during my university years, I felt constantly busy but rarely in control, and it wasn't until I built a proper system that everything changed. That system is what allows me to work full-time as a doctor, run this YouTube channel, train consistently, coach, and still have a personal life. It's not about working harder, it's about structuring your time in a way that multiplies your output. And in this video here, I break down the exact framework I use to make time for everything that matters. So to apply what you've learned here instead of just understanding it, click the video to learn more.